Hey, it's Kesha. Welcome and welcome back. We are on our next section of the Aquarian. So let us just begin by centering down. So we'll close our eyes first, taking a deep breath in and releasing it. Another deep breath in and out. And just feel ourselves becoming more present in this moment, in this time and space. Release any thoughts and disturbance of what our earthly life is like. Just releasing those cares and concerns. Feeling them move away from you with each exhale. And with each inhale, begin to gently and lovingly call back all of your power into yourself. And on the exhale, feel it falling into place and feeling yourself being made whole with each inhale and exhale. Draw your power in, allowing it to settle, and repeat. And now see a column of white light coming down over you. And breathe in the coolness, the calmness, and the peace of this light. Making all of those bumpy connections and joinings smooth and straight. With each breath, feeling ourselves made whole. We can now lift up into our higher consciousness, greater sense of awareness. Feeling just how great it is to remember ourselves as sons and daughters of the stars. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. So, Jesus still in Jerusalem. The Jewish Paschal Feast time had come, and Jesus left his mother in Capernaum and journeyed to Jerusalem. And he abode with one, a Sadducee, whose name was Jude. And when he reached the temple courts, the multitudes were there to see the prophet, who the people thought had come to break the yoke of Rome, restore the kingdom of the Jews, and rule on David's throne. Even though he's told them he's not come to be their king that way, but they still look for him. And when the people saw him come, they said, "All hail, behold the king." But Jesus answered not. He saw the money changers in the house of God, and he was grieved. The courts had been converted to marts of trade, and men were selling lambs and doves for offerings and sacrifice. And Jesus called the priests and said, "Behold, for paltry gain you have sold out the temple of the Lord. This house ordained for prayer is now a den of thieves. Can good and evil dwell together in the courts of God? I tell you, no." And then he made a scourge of cords and drove the merchants out. He overturned their boards and threw their money on the floor. He opened up the cages of the captive birds and cut the cords that bound the lambs and set them free. And the priests and scribes rushed out, and they would have done him harm, but they were driven back. The common people stood in his defense. And then the rulers said, "Who is this Jesus you call king?" The people said, "He is the Christ of whom our prophets wrote. He is the king who will deliver Israel." The ruler said to Jesus, "Man, if you be king or Christ, then show us signs. Who gave you right to drive these merchants out?" And Jesus said, "There is no loyal Jew who would not give his life to save this temple from disgrace. In this I acted simply as a loyal Jew. And you yourselves will bear me witness to this truth. The signs of my messiahship will follow me in words and deeds. And you may tear the temple down, and you will tear it down. And in 3 days it will be built again, more glorious than before." Now Jesus meant that they might take his life, tear down his body, temple of the holy breath, and he would rise again. The Jews knew not the meaning of his words. They laughed his claims to scorn. They said, "The multitude of men were 40 and 6 years in building up this house, and this young stranger claims that he will build it up again in 60 hours. His words are idle, his claims are not." And then they took the scourge with which he drove the merchants out, and he would have driven them away. But Philo, who had come from Egypt to attend the feast, stood forth and said, "You men of Israel, hear. This man is more than man. Take heed to what you do. I have myself heard Jesus speak, and all the winds were still. And I have seen him touch the sick, and they were healed, and he stands a sage above the sages of the world. You will see his star rise, and it will grow until it is full-born son of righteousness. Do not be hasty, men. Just wait, and you will have the proofs of his messiahship." And then the priest laid down the scourge, and Jesus said, "Prepare, O Israel, prepare to meet your king. But you can never sing the king while you press sin as such as precious idols in your hearts. The king is God. The pure in heart alone can see the face of God and live." And then the priest cried out, "This fellow claims to be God. Is not this sacrilege? Away with him." But Jesus said, "No man has ever heard me say I am king. Our Father God is king. With every loyal Jew, I worship God. I am the candle of the Lord, a flame to light the way. And while you have the light, walk in the light." Next day, the multitudes were searching through the temple courts, intent on hearing Jesus speak. And when he came, the people said, "All hail, behold the king." And Jesus spoke a parable. He said, "A king has vast domains. His people all were kin, and he lived in peace. Now, after many years, the king said to his people, 'Take these lands and all that I have, enhance their values, rule yourselves, and live in peace.' And then the people formed their states, selected governors and petty kings, but pride, ambition, selfish greed, and base ingratitude grew fast, and the kings began to war. They wrote in all their statute books that might is right, and then the strong destroyed the weak, and chaos reigned all the vast domain. The time long passed, and then the king looked out onto his domain. He saw his people in their cruel wars. He saw them sick and sore distressed. He saw the strong enslave the weak. And then he said, 'What shall I do? Shall I send forth the scourge? Shall I destroy all my people?' And then his heart was stirred with pity, and he said, 'I will not send a scourge. I will send forth my only son, heir to the throne, to teach the people love and peace and righteousness.' And he sent his son to the people. And he sent his son. The people scorned and maltreated him and nailed him to a cross. He was entombed, but death was far too weak to hold the prince, and he arose. He took a form man could not kill, and then he went again to teach the people love and peace and righteousness. And thus God deals with men. A lawyer came and asked, 'What does Messiah mean? And who has right to make Messiah of a man?' And Jesus said, 'Messiah is one sent from God to seek and save the lost. Messiahs are not made by men.' In first of every age, Messiah comes to light the way, to heal up broken hearts, to set the prisoners free. Messiah and the Christ are one. Because a man claims to be Christ is not a sign that he is Christ. A man may cause the streams to flow from flinty rocks, may bring on storms at will, may stay tempestuous winds, may heal the sick and raise the dead, and not be sent from God. All nature is subservient to the will of man, and evil men, as well as good, have all the powers of mind, and may control the elements. The head gives not the proof of true messiahship, for man by means of intellect can never know of God, nor bring himself to walk in light. Messiah lives not in the head, but in the heart, the seat of mercy and of love. Messiah never works for selfish gains. He stands above the carnal self. His words and deeds are for the universal good. Messiah never tries to be a king, to wear a crown and sit upon an earthly throne. The king is earthy and of earth. Messiah is the man from heaven." And then the lawyer asked, "Why do you pose as king?" And Jesus said, No man has ever heard me say that I am king. I could not sit in Caesar's place and be the Christ. Give unto Caesar what belongs to him. Give unto God the treasures of your heart. It was the Sabbath day, and Jesus stood among the surging masses of the people in the temple courts and sacred halls. The blind, the deaf, the dumb, and those obsessed were there, and Jesus spoke the word, and they were healed. On some he laid his hands, and they were healed. To others he just spoke the word, and they were full restored to health. But others had to go and wash in certain pools, and others he anointed with the holy oil. A doctor asked him why he healed in diverse ways, and he replied, disease is discord in human form, and discords are produced in many ways. The body is a harpsichord. Sometimes the strings are too relaxed and then harmony results. Sometimes we find the strings too tense and then another form of discord is induced. Disease is many formed, and there are many ways to cure, to tune anew the mystic harpsichord. Now, when the Pharisees were told that Jesus healed the people on the Sabbath day, they were enraged, and they commanded him to quit the place. But Jesus said, was man designed to fit the Sabbath, or was the Sabbath day designed to fit the man? If you had fallen in a pit, and lo, the Sabbath day had come, and I would pass your way, would you cry out, let me alone, it's a sin to help me on the Sabbath day? I'll swelter in this filth until another day. You Pharisees, you hypocrites, you know you would be glad to have my help upon the Sabbath day or any other day. These people all have fallen into pits, and they are calling loud for me to help them out. And man and God would curse me should I pass along and heed them not. And then the Pharisees returned to say their prayers and curse the man of God because he heeded not their words. Now, in the evening, Jesus stood beside a pool. A playful child had fallen in, and it was drowned, and friends were bearing it away. But Jesus called the carriers to stop, and then he stretched himself upon the lifeless form and breathed into his mouth the breath of life. And then he called aloud into the soul that had gone out, and it returned, and the child revived and lived. And Jesus saw a wounded dog, and it would not move. It lay beside the way and groaned with pain. He took it in his arms and bore it to the home where he abode. He poured the healing oil into its wounds, and he cared for it as though it were a child, till it was strong and well. And Jesus saw a little boy who had no home, and he was hungry, and when he called for bread, the people turned away. And Jesus took the child and gave him bread and wrapped him in his own warm coat and found for him a home. To those who followed him, the master said, if man would gain again his lost estate, he must respect the brotherhood of life. Whoever is not kind to every form of life, to man, to beast, to bird, and creeping thing, cannot expect the blessings of the Holy One. For as we give, so God will give to us. That's probably enough. We should stop there. A fair amount has happened, I think. So just going back to where we started. So remember when Jesus was in the wilderness, and he says, "What am I going to say when people demand? What will I say when people will demand proof of my messiahship?" We have that here, and it's a natural thing for him to have asked, and we understood it then, and here we have it playing out, and so, everybody's coming to see the king, and again, we've kind of already talked about this. He's told them many times he's not come to be the king in the royal way that we think of kings and queens and royalty. He's bringing a new message. And we get that when he says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but give the treasure of your hearts to God. And so when asked, who are you and what is messiahship, he says, my words and deeds will tell you who I am. And so we see in his deeds, and I like the parable, of course. God has given all the people an opportunity to rule themselves, and they descend into chaos because they allow, ego, greed, pride, ambition, selfishness, to bring them to war. And so he says, rather than send a scourge, which we had in the Old Testament, right? First you had the flood, and then he says there's a rainbow covenant. I'm not going to send the elements to wipe you out again. There's the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we've already seen what an Old Testament God would be, and Jesus is bringing a new message. So with that, he's telling this parable, and he says, well, so should I send a scourge? No, not this time. I'm just going to send my son. And what he tells is going to happen of his son is that they're going to cut him down, but death is no mere cage for him, and so he will rise again within 3 days and still continue to teach love and peace. Messiah and Christ are one, and in every age there has been one. It's an office, right? And we can ascend to that office in ourselves, again going back to the test of Heliopolis, when we have Christed in each of our chakras, when we have mastered all of those tests, then we have attained the Christ within ourselves. And then we see him, once again, he says to them, you've never heard me say that I am king, right? And then we see him beginning, he's healing the people, and he does it by many different methods, right? And immediately when I was reading that, I was like, oh, right, that's Olive Udraka's teaching, right? The mystical harpsichord. There are many ways in which we find ourselves diseased, and so it takes many different ways for us to be cured. There isn't one cure-all for everybody. Not everybody is broken in the same way, and so for some it takes a healing balm. For some, they need some act to go and do, and so that's them being asked to go to a certain pool and wash a certain number of times. For others, they can accept their healing by simply hearing the word, and so Jesus speaks the word over them. For some, they need that physical touch, and so for them he lays on their hands. For others, it's the breath of life, and so he breathes into them. And we see the many different ways in which he heals. There's one little thing that I missed. I just saw this. When Jesus is talking about, so just before he begins to heal everyone, he says, he's like, he's been asked, what is the Christ and what are the proof of his messiahship? And he's like, well, any man can claim to be, because a man claims to be the Christ doesn't mean that it's a sign that he is. There are lots of signs and wonders that people can do, whether that's bringing water from a rock or controlling the elements. He says anyone can do that. And I think we miss that, right? We think it's just an example of something that he's saying, but he's actually telling us that this is something that is true for all of us, right? That all nature is subservient to the will of man, and evil men as well as good. So anyone who engages the powers of their mind can thus control the elements. And so being able to control the elements and to create outcomes of your choosing is not necessarily a sign of messiahship. And just a little note, like, that's something to try. I have done that as, homework and been able to control the elements, but that's not necessarily the sign that I'm the Christ. It just means that I was using my mind powers to control the elements. But if you're studying the lessons of Christ, then it makes sense to work to, one, accept the promise that these things I do, you shall do in greater, but then to actually try to do the things that he did, so that you will know that, to make that promise true for you, and that it's not just words, but it's a living and breathing doctrine that you live and breathe. Anyway, going back to the different teachings. He speaks the word, and I almost kind of wish that, the word was there so we know what it is, but the word of power, I suppose if you want to know what the word of power is, the way to attain that is to meditate on it and ask to be given that knowledge. So washing certain pools, being anointed with oil, having their hands laid on, having accepted the breath of life. And he makes a good point that, because the Sadducees or the Pharisees are coming telling him that you can't heal on the Sabbath, what difference does it make what day it is if people are hurting? If you had fallen down into a pit, you would want me to help you. You wouldn't want me to wait until it was an appropriate day to save you. And if these people have fallen into a pit, why would I wait? It just goes to show, too, that so many of the laws that are created, they're not created with people in mind so much as the idea of power, people wielding power. And he heals not only people, of course, he heals the animals as well. And I think that was all the major pieces, or the major points that stick out. I'd be curious what of what we just read sticks out for you. What is something that you would like to meditate on for the week? Yeah, I'm curious. I think one of the things that I want to take away with, I think I'd like to meditate on the word of power. That's something that I could see could be useful. Yeah, what is the healing word of power? All right, so I look forward to talking to you next week, seeing what's up, and we'll take our next step in our next section of reading. All right, until next week, I love you in the meantime. Bye.